Okay, so as a student, you've probably experienced times where you've gotten all prepared to sit down and do some work, and you might even want to do the work in these moments, but for whatever reason, you just can't focus. And this can be really annoying, especially if you've done everything else right, like managing your time well and properly scheduling your studying. And I've been there too, but a couple years ago, I came across an important mindset change that helped me understand focus a lot better, which has helped me become the top student of my year in engineering with straight A pluses for 3.5 years now. So in this video, we're going to outline that mindset shift that helped me understand focus a lot better and then use it to improve your focus. Many people will say they've never been able to focus and they've tried all the techniques, but nothing works. They think that by implementing some sort of focus hack, that their focus is just going to shoot up like a light switch and they're all of a sudden going to be able to study for hours and hours and hours upon end. And when this doesn't happen, they get disappointed and they think that, oh, it must be me that's the problem. I just can't focus. Or I don't have the inherent ability to focus. But slow down and just think about it for a minute. You're saying you're trying all these different focus techniques and none of them are working. But why should they work? Think about this, all right? Suppose you got this guy and this guy wants to get to the gym. He wants to get in shape, all right? So he goes to the gym, he tries all the different machines, all the different lifts, all the different exercises, all the different techniques. And at the end of it, he looks at himself, he sees no difference. And so he says, oh, it must not have worked. What would you say to this guy? Would you just tell him that nothing worked and that you've got no hope and you have no inherent ability to get in shape? No, of course not. You would just tell him, hey, you haven't been at this long enough. You need to put time into this to see results, and you just haven't developed the skill of lifting enough to get the result, which is to get in shape. And so just like how this guy didn't develop the skill of lifting enough to get in shape, most people just haven't developed the skill of focus enough to be able to focus. The big takeaway I want you to get from this point is that focus is a skill, and skills can be developed. So if focus is a skill, how do we develop that skill? And well, you develop it like you would develop any other skill, with deliberate practice. Not just showing up, not just doing the thing, because if you're doing it wrong, you're not going to be progressing. You need to have deliberate practice. So let me show you what that looks like. Okay, so this is the description that I saw when I learned about the idea of deliberate practice. And so the idea is that, hey, let's say we have this plot, okay? And on the x-axis, we have our time, and on the y-axis, we have skill. When you're first learning to drive, your skill in driving increases very quickly. And this is because you're deliberately practicing your weak points and you have an instructor who's teaching you and who's telling you what you did right and what you did wrong. And this is deliberate practice. You're going with the intention of getting better. Now, once you've completed your road test and you have your license, what happens? Most people will continue to get better a little bit as they gain a little bit of experience on the road. But then most people's skill plateaus. You've got so many people on the road, but you wouldn't call them all masters at driving. In fact, you'd say some of them are pretty bad. Now, why is that, right? These people have thousands of hours on the road. Why aren't they getting better and better and better and better? Why do we not see this line continuing to go up and up and up and up and up, and we have a bunch of like master drivers on the road? Well, it's because in this first scenario where you had the teacher teaching you, this was deliberate practice. And so once you pass the road test, this rest of this region here is just from showing up. You don't have a driver. You're not deliberately practicing. So this kind of counteracts the idea that just showing up is good enough. You can see that at the beginning here, yeah, just showing up gets you a little bit of an increase. But eventually, just showing up doesn't lead to any increase. You're flat. You're not growing in skill. It's only when we have that deliberate practice that we're seeing any measurable increase in our skill. And there's a similar thing in the gym, right? Most people, when they start, they get a pretty good increase and then they start to plateau and they just stay here forever. And this is because at the beginning, like when you first started driving on your own, you get a little bit of increase in skill just from gaining that experience of going out on your own. So just like when you first start showing up to the gym, yeah, you're going to get bigger, you're going to get better in that skill and your lifts are going to go up. But after that, if you don't intentionally and deliberately practice, you will plateau. And that's inevitably what happens to a lot of gym goers. You don't make progress in the gym if you just go and lift the same weight every week. If you want to gain muscle and see results, you need to go every week and increase the weight or increase some aspect of your technique or something like that. And then you get to see the results. But that result doesn't come without deliberate practice. This is deliberate and this is showing up. And so this is why just showing up and trying to focus and trying to study doesn't make you a master at focus. Because if you're just showing up with the same technique every time, that's not a good technique. Eventually you plateau. You're going to make a little bit of gains at the beginning. Your focus is going to improve. And then eventually you just plateau. It's not until you have deliberate practice that you're going to start seeing gains in your focus, just like we saw with gains in the gym. Okay, so we know that we need to deliberately practice focus to get better at it. But how do you do that? How do you practice focus? Well, we first need a metric in order to see if we're improving, right? So in the gym, there's a few metrics you might use. You might use like your physique here. You might say, hey, I'm visibly seeing my physique improving. That's the metric that I'm measuring against. Without seeing that improvement in your physique, it's hard to say if you're making progress or not. Or another way you probably look at it in the gym is you'll track your lifts to see your weights going up. And by seeing your weights going up week by week, you get to see that, hey, I'm making progress here, so I'm doing something right. So we need an equivalent metric so that we can measure our focus to see if we're improving. And a good metric that we can use for focus would be focus time. What if how people track their lifts, like tracking the weight of their lifts going up and up each week, you track how long you're able to focus for in a certain work session. So every time you sit down to work, you set a quick timer, it takes like 5 seconds to do, and then when you lose focus or when you stop working, you check your timer and you write that down. And then you do the same thing the next day, the next day, the next day, the next day, okay? And so by doing this, you get to see just how long you're focusing for in your work blocks. Of course, just like with lifting, eventually once you have experience, you can do these things intuitively, but early on, I think it's really best to actually monitor it and have that metric to see that you're improving. Then as you implement techniques and develop skills to improve your focus, you should be able to see it increasing. Of course, it's not going to be like always increasing. You might have dips. Some tasks are harder to work on than others. So it's not always going to be a perfect increase, but you can look for general trends. And when you're consistently reaching a time that you're happy with, like let's say call it 1 hour, well, now you don't necessarily need to track anymore. Like I don't track my focus hours because I'm happy with how long I can focus for at a time. So it's not necessarily some permanent thing, but it is something that'll definitely help while you're trying to see that improvement in your focus. It just helps you see that your efforts are going somewhere and you're not making no progress. Okay, so that's pretty much the mindset part of this video. And now I'll talk to you about a few things that you can do and that you can implement in order to see those improvements in your focus. Okay, so the biggest thing you can do to improve your focus is to control your environment. You might think that, hey, he's a top student, he can probably study whenever, he can probably focus so well. But I'm telling you right now, if you put me in a library with a bunch of people and people are talking and there's distractions, I'm gonna get as much work done as you do. Honestly, I've only been able to become productive because of my ability to control my environment, because of my ability to find a good place to work, to know to work alone, and to know that I need to block out distractions. Did you know that every time a distraction takes away your focus, it takes like 15 minutes for your brain to get back into the same flow state, the same state of work that you were in before? Like 15 minutes, that's a huge period of time. You should be thinking, wow, I need to block out distractions at all costs. But fortunately, this is pretty easy to do. You know, phones off, put your phone away, put it in another room, put it in the cabinet. I keep mine in a cabinet right here. There's no notifications, D&D is on, and I do that because I know that every distraction that pops up takes away your focus. And so other than that, you just need to find a quiet place to study without having any distractions. So preferably this is on your own because another person is a distraction. And one other thing to consider is that, hey, maybe you don't have a certain place that's always a quiet place to study, but maybe you have a certain time that's a quiet place to study. Maybe you get up before your family gets up to get a couple hours of work done then. Maybe one part of the library is quiet at this certain hour, so you get work done then. Creating an environment that limits distraction is pretty much the single most important thing you can do to improve your focus, because I couldn't imagine getting a quarter of the work that I usually will get done sitting at this desk done at a busy library. It just would not happen. So by controlling your environment, you should see a pretty instant increase in your focus times. Now here's the thing. Focusing will still probably be very hard for you if you have a bad attention span. And how do you solve this? Well, you need to be reducing your heavily stimulating bad habits, because these are what makes your attention span very bad and make it so that focusing on work is just not enjoyable at all. Of course, your brain won't be able to focus on the work in front of you if it's used to constantly being stimulated by something like social media, video games, TV, something like that. So you need to limit your bad habits. It's going to make focusing a lot easier. It's going to make studying more enjoyable. It's going to make life more enjoyable. I got another video on it. You can check it here. And this is a big thing that will help you with your focus. Now, the last easy thing you can do to improve your focus is meditation. And meditation is highly underrated because it trains the skill of presence. And what is presence but the ability to focus on whatever's in front of you? So I'll tell you about how that works quick. Basically, it's just sitting down, close your eyes, and you focus on your breath for some period of time. And every time your focus drifts away from your breath, that's when you have to know to bring it back. And so obviously this helps a lot when you're focusing on your schoolwork, because instead of focusing on the breath, and then when your mind drifts, you bring your focus back to the breath, you are focusing on your schoolwork. And when your focus drifts, you bring it back to the schoolwork. So it's really easy. You can do it in like 3-5 minutes a day, whatever you want to do. I use the app Medito, and there's a lot of other benefits to meditation, so highly would recommend it. So that's pretty much it. And as an action item for this video, you should A, start tracking your focus time, and B, pick one of the 3 things I said, which was either controlling your environment, picking a bad habit to reduce, or meditation, implement that, and then start seeing your focus times increase. And that's all. So the big takeaway from this video is that focus is a skill, and like other skills, socializing, gym, whatever it may be, skills can be developed. So I hope that mindset, plus the little bit of actionable advice I gave, can help you focus better.